Okay. And I know there's interest in discussing both, so I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to put forward a motion to lift those items.
Please, yes.
And is that carried? Sure. Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll come to those later. Moving to item 1 on our agenda, we have an application to alter 61 Park Road, a property located in Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District, designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So we're going to ask staff to start off this item with a presentation, and then I know we have speakers, and then we'll have a chance for questions and discussion. So over to staff, please.
And good morning. This application is for an addition to 61 Park Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This Grade 1 property is located in Rockcliffe Park at the northeast corner of Park Road and Elmwood Avenue. The house was designed by renowned architect Werner Noffke in the English cottage style. The building features stucco with half-timbering details on the upper story and stone on the first floor. This area of Rockcliffe Park is characterized by two-story houses inspired by the English arts and crafts constructed in the early 20th century. Over the past several years, the house has been left vacant and in a state of disrepair. The large lot is heavily treed. The photo on the left shows existing garage accessed from Elmwood Avenue. The photo on the right shows the location of the proposed driveway, which would be accessed from Park Road. This driveway would be located between existing trees without requiring their removal. The top image shows the existing house, while the lower one shows the house with the proposed new additions. The proposal includes masonry repairs, 2 additions, one to the northeast of the house, and one to the west, a new relocated garage, a new roof, and the addition of 1 new window opening over the entrance. The additions are distinguishable from the original house as they are stepped back from the facades and below the roofline, providing a visual break between old and new. The additions will take inspiration from the existing form of the house in terms of materials and configurations. Stucco, half-timbering, and stone will be used throughout. The north part of the addition will also have a gable roof and continue the use of stone, stucco, and half-timbering. The garage roof will be flat. The height of all additions will be lower than the original house. In order to create more usable space on the 3rd floor, the roof is proposed to be rebuilt with a steeper pitch. Rafter tails, synonymous with this style of house, will be reinstated under the eaves of the new roof. A new garage is to be added to the side and rear of the eastern addition, set back considerably from Park Road. Access will be through a heavily treed buffer, which will provide a visual barrier between the proposed garage and the public street. This image shows the rear additions to the building. Although the increase in living space area is significant, the majority of the addition is below the main roof line of the house and not visible from the street. The tree buffer along Elmwood screens the rear additions from the street. 11 trees on the property are proposed for removal. 7 of them are located right behind the existing building, with 1 being a mature tree. The landscape plan includes the retention of the existing narrow walkway to the front door and a newly proposed terrace in the rear yard. The lot coverage after the proposed additions will be 24.6%. The resulting footprint is similar to its neighbors and other Grade 1 buildings in the vicinity. For example, when looking at the lot coverage on the surrounding Grade 1 properties, the average is 25%. The proposal for 61 Park Road is to increase the lot coverage to 24.6%, which is well under the permitted 30%. The removal of the garage and driveway on Elmwood Avenue will benefit the eastern lawn, as there will no longer be any hard surfacing on the corner side yard. Much of the new driveway will be screened by a densely treed buffer. In conclusion, staff recommends to approve the application to alter the building at 61 Park Road, to approve the application to demolish the detached garage, approve the landscape plan, and to issue a heritage permit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. We'll go straight to our public speakers and then again chance for questions thereafter. So first on the list is we have Robert Martin and Maria Cristina Villalba. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee. You have 5 minutes to speak, as you know.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. This particular building is not in very good shape. It was held in ownership by a previous owner for many decades, and so there's a kind of accumulated deterioration. But as Ashley had mentioned, the approach on the existing building is one of restoration, so reinstatement of damaged porch canopy features and maintaining the existing fenestration and typical details. The discussion about replacing the roof was one that was carefully taken. Simply put, the existing roof is not well detailed. It doesn't allow any insulation in the roof and curtails the height on the second floor. So we don't get sufficient ventilation and insulation. And furthermore, in terms of like kind of visual continuity with the adjacent buildings, on 360 degrees around this property, there are roof pitches in the 12-12 slopes. So we feel we're being very consistent with the neighboring buildings. Some have similar kind of design characteristics, others different. But we feel this is a necessary and beneficial change to the structure, and we're still under the height limits within the zoning provisions. The strategy is to locate the additions away from the primary facades and the roadways. In this case, by taking away the existing driveway off Elmwood and tucking it behind the house, we're maintaining sort of a roadway entrance between existing mature trees. And so this, I think, improves the streetscape. Any of the vegetation that's being removed is diseased or dead. There's only one tree in the center that might be viable. And our plan is to reinstate at least twice as many trees as are removed. So the net result we feel will be, compatible with the existing house and the surrounding streetscape, and the predominance of soft vegetation or landscape elements. Roughly 3/4 of the site will remain as a landscape space, and we feel this is very consistent with the primary heritage character for Rockcliffe Park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know I had one question, but I just want to see if others do. So, Member Small, would you go first?
Thank you. Hi, Robert. A couple of questions just about the materials. I noticed in the report that you said stone, stucco, and half timbering. I just wanted to confirm that by stone you mean natural stone. Sometimes people use the term stone when they mean things that are manufactured. So.
Our intention in this case is actual stone, probably in a sort of 4-inch, 100-millimeter section that will be applied to a backup wall.
So a limestone, I'm assuming?
Yes.
And the half timbering, will that be rough sawn half timbering?
I don't think we've worked out the details yet, but the idea would be certainly again to emulate the half timbered look. Typically, the wooden elements are embedded in the stucco, and I think that would be our approach in this case as well.
Yeah, and typically they're a rough sawn, not a finished sawn.
Yeah.
And the stucco, is that a true stucco, as was common on those houses, or are you leaning towards a paneled?
I'm not a big fan of the so-called EIFS stucco systems. However, the availability of trades who do the traditional pebble dash or a cementitious stucco, true cementitious stucco, is getting harder to find. So I think at this point, it might be more of a acrylic stucco, but textured in a way that matches the original.
I'd be fascinated to see that. I've never seen it occur with that new system, that it would match the ruggedness and the depth of the old stucco. Okay. And the one last thing, you mentioned that the height of the proposed roof pitch is, you explained the reasons why, and you said that it is compatible with the pitch of some of the other houses in the neighborhood. But I wondered whether or not, I didn't see any relationship with, say, the house next door at 97 Park. Will this make this house taller than the adjacent house?
Yeah, in the package, we'd actually done an analysis of all the houses in the vicinity, right, in terms of their lot coverage. I mean, both building area, lot coverage, and roof pitches, because this was a concern raised by city staff and even the residents association. So we felt we needed to answer to this point. So to come to your question, we'd actually worked on the adjacent building at Park, which is also a Nofke building. Mm-hmm. So it has a mixture of roof pitches, but primarily it's a 12-12 pitch, so in that sense it will be compatible with its adjacent neighbor.
But will it be, in absolute terms, higher or lower or the same as the neighbor? I mean, I understand the pitch will be the same. Yes. But I'm talking about the height of the house in general. I mean, obviously that will be determined by floor heights and that, and so I'm just wondering, will this house appear taller than its neighboring house?
I don't think so. This section of Park is actually quite flat, and the two houses were built at roughly the same time. If anything, I think the house at 97 Park will be slightly higher because it's actually built on a slight hillock. So the net effect, I think, will be, I don't have the exact data, I'm going to say very similar in height.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just had a question or two related to the landscape plan, which is on page 7 of 29 of the package of drawings that I have in front of me. And I guess my first question was, there are a number of trees slated for removal by the front steps on the Park Road entrance, and I'm just curious whether that was an aesthetic decision or why it was felt that those trees should be removed.
I think, they're not in particularly good condition, so they're kind of scraggly to begin with, and I think the landscape architect thought they would be best removed.
There is looks like a large tree canopy on the northwest corner of the property, which is showing in the landscape plan, I think, as retention. There's a couple of codes there. I don't know if that's a number of trees that form a canopy, but it sounds like those are going to be retained. Is that correct?
So if it's the one that I think you're referring to, it might be the one over the present garage, with the code name SV, which I believe is a purple lilac.
Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah, so I think that one is, again, not in particularly good condition. These trees have certain lifespans too, so this one's getting on. But really the main intention here along Elmwood and Park is to retain the existing vegetative screening and to add to it with new plantings. So that large, it looks like a large canopy, that's one single large tree that's going to be removed? Yes. And that's to make way for the terrace, is that right? Yeah, correct. And that was felt important. I'm just thinking that in terms of if part of the secret of this application, or one of the benefits of it, is to screen the massing from public views, I just would have thought that a mature tree of this size might benefit in terms of its ability to screen, particularly from that sort of Elmwood vantage point. Did you want to say anything?
So that series of, that large canopy that you see there is a series of lilac trees all bunched together. They're not mature. They're small in size, and some of them are deceased and some of them dead, and some of them are alive, but I don't think it will add anything to the landscape. We will plant more trees that way to give coverage to the terrace.
Okay. Any other questions from members? I see none, so thank you to the both of you for coming to speak to us this morning. So next on the list of public delegations is Mary Ann Fever. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee. And yes, you have 5 minutes to speak, and there's a little button for the microphone there.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ann Fever, and my family has lived across the street in one house over from 61 Park since 1949. The owners of the property in question have lived for many years just across the street from this property, and they're actually friends of ours, and we have in the past appeared together at the Committee of Adjustment to oppose the doubling in size of the building between us. We didn't succeed in opposing it, and so that building was doubled in size, as was the Nafki house beside it, and that was also doubled in size. But all of this was before the City of Ottawa enacted unanimously the Heritage Plan, which is now in effect since 2016. I'm also a member of this Rockcliffe Park Heritage Committee, and I'm very familiar with this Heritage Plan, which I doubt most residents are, despite many efforts to make the plan known to all. As a matter of fact, I asked Kit in casual, that's Mrs. E, in casual conversation whether she knew of the Heritage Plan. She said not really. So it's just not well enough known, but what I feel is, with this application and what hasn't been mentioned to date, is a total disregard for this plan, particularly in regards to mass and lot coverage. The Heritage Plan states that all additions to Grade 1 buildings shall be complementary to the existing building, subordinate to the original, and compatible in terms of massing, facade proportion, and roof lines. This proposed addition takes the footprint from 158 square meters to 358 square meters. Is this 120% increase somebody's definition of subordinate to? In no way is this addition compatible in terms of massing. I was shocked when I saw the extent of this lot coverage too. The proposal takes the lot coverage from 10.9 to 24.6. The objective of the Heritage Plan is also to preserve green space and states, the existing landscape character of a lot will be preserved when additions are constructed. Lot coverage that is as extensive as this has no regard for this provision. The applicant tries to justify this by saying that it's within the zoning bylaw, but my understanding is that the Heritage Plan takes precedent over the zoning bylaw when the two are in conflict, as they are in this case. The builders argue the scale of additions is within the average of the neighboring lot coverage. Well, were I to apply the zoning bylaw to my double property, I could build a huge mansion. But I also want to point out that the two neighboring houses that had these massive additions and huge erosions into the green space were completed before the Heritage Plan was in effect, and are in part what gives the plan its raison d'être. I find the design of this house is handsome, but anyone might be hard-pressed to find many elements of the existing house remaining, because they're so dwarfed by the new additions on all sides, and also the roof pitch is greatly altered. But I really will hold my opposition to two crucial points. It's the mass and lot coverage, which so completely ignores the Heritage Plan. And I feel that I question the validity of the Heritage Plan if we ignore this. And that's it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming out this morning. Are there any questions Ms. Fever? Oh, I see none, so thank you very much for coming out this morning. I have a couple of questions to staff arising from your questions, but which I'll get to now. So again, thank you very much for coming out. So I see no other speakers registered on the list, so we can turn now to questions and comments. I'll let Member Smallwood go first.
A question of staff. I just wondered, just a comment too, although you correctly identified as Park Road at the beginning on page 18, it changes to Park Avenue. And as a recipient of pizzas from Park Avenue, I'm sensitive to the requirements that it be called Park Road. I just wondered, it occurred to me because I'm a neighbor, I live across the street as well, and I know I'm sensitive to the concerns that Ms. Fever raised. But I noticed that on 97 Park Road, there's the original house is probably similar in size to 91 Park. And then over a period of years, there's been a series of additions added onto it. And I think the most recent one, fairly successfully tying them together. And I wondered, every time, I mean, in this particular case, what's happening, and I think what's so jarring, is there's been no changes to the house in over 100 years. And now all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch being done to it at once. If some, and the concern raised is that we're going from, the relatively speaking smaller existing house and putting all these additions around it at once. If somebody had come forward, or somebody normally comes forward and adds an addition to a house, and then 6 months or a year or some years later, they come and propose another addition, when you look at the house, you don't look back at what the original house was, you look at the house with the additions on it, I'm assuming. So in this particular case, I guess part of what we're seeing is just the impact of no additions and then all of a sudden several additions perhaps being done all at once. With the new guideline in terms of the neighborhood, how much impact do you look at the original house versus the series of additions when you're deciding? I mean, I guess you look at whatever the most recent addition was, and that's considered the existing house, not what used to be there at some point in the past, right?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Look at all the additions that have been added to the house and its impact on the new addition proposals, its impact on the streetscape and the lot.
Okay, I had a question of staff, which is just following up on a point that Ms. Fever raised, quoting the guidelines for grade 1 buildings in the plan. All additions to grade 1 buildings shall be complementary to the existing building, subordinate to, and distinguishable from. So in the question of subordinate to, I presume, based on your positive recommendation, that you're not defining subordinate to simply in terms of the mass of the addition versus mass of the original house. Can you explain a little bit to the committee what the subordinate sort of rationale was and why you feel in this case that the addition would satisfy that particular guideline?
Mr. Chair, the term subordinate in the plan does not mean smaller as far as mass goes. In this particular instance, you can see on the screen behind you, the additions are lower and also set back from the original house, therefore keeping the original Nofke 1908 design, the prominence. And the new addition will be distinguishable from because of this setback and lower roof line.
And then in terms of the concerns raised about the impact on the landscape in terms of that additional addition, what was your reaction to that, and in what ways do you feel like, given your recommendation, that this proposed addition respects the landscaping provisions of the plan?
And Mr. Chair, although the increase is quite significant. The rear lot line remains from the addition 13.1 meters from the adjacent property, which is, sorry. Oh, you can see just here behind you, the house behind, as I said, 13 meters of green space still in the rear, as well as a side yard. Now that the driveway and garage will be relocated to Park Road, there'll be more green buffering to the side, so that'll be to the west. So we feel that the addition, although is large, still maintains the vast green space and park-like setting of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Any other questions to staff? No? So, well, I'll just offer my own thoughts as a summary. I think this particular application from an architectural point of view offers a sympathetic addition to the original building, as we know, created by a famous Ottawa architect. But I do think what is beginning to emerge, particularly in some of these applications in Rockcliffe Park, is some question of different ways of interpreting the plan, and I think it would be wise for there to be a continued conversation about some of the disagreements between the community through the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association and the staff on how some of these terms are interpreted. And I just wondering out loud whether some kind of interpretive guideline or a glossary or something needs to be explored moving forward, just because it seems like we're in a situation where there are these different ways or different lenses of interpretation. So I'm hopeful that that kind of dialogue could be fruitful and sort of help us through what I think are some differing views on the plan. That said, in this case, in light of the fact that the addition, although large, is respecting the zoning bylaw, and there were efforts made through the landscape plan to provide additional soft landscaping and additional trees, notwithstanding the removal, I myself plan to vote in favor of the staff recommendation, with the proviso that I think we probably need to have a larger discussion about the heritage plan interpretation. So that's all I wanted to say on this. Mr. Vice Chair.
I'd just like to thank the staff and the architect for the presentation, particularly the portions of the drawings that illustrate the existing elevations and the proposed changes. That helps everybody understand the interventions. The second thing is that, as Ms. Fever outlined, it seems that the new Heritage Conservation District plan has wording in it that suggests that additions have to be evaluated in a way where the terms that are used, subordinate and distinguishable from, and massing. I think that there's work to be done here in the future about finding a way to demonstrate how the size of an addition is evaluated, not just on the mathematical percentages, but in ways which are transparent and understandable and can be applied from property to property for their individual contexts. So I think we have work to do there in the report. And for instance, subordinate to, does this mean subordinate to from all views, or is it just from the public realm? I think these are things that need some work in order to help us to maintain and reinforce the credibility of the Heritage Conservation Plan and the way it's interpreted. So that's just a comment, but I support this application.
Just thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. That is certainly something that the Heritage Section has been examining ways of clarifying and helping everyone understand applications. So we'll be looking at that in the next few months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So on the application, is it carried? Carried. Okay, thank you, and thank you to members of the public for coming out this morning. So we are moving next to our other items, are there any notices of motion? No, I see none. No inquiries. So I guess under other business, we will raise the two inquiries, which we successfully did at the beginning of the meeting. So Councillor McKinney, why don't you go first on the Somerset inquiry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 352 Somerset, better known as Somerset House. The last meeting I asked about the status of the development here, and I've been asking about this since I was elected, but residents have been asking about this for just over 10 years now, and more anxiously. Really fail to understand how the owner of this property is allowed to let a building like Somerset House essentially disintegrate in front of our eyes and ruin probably one of the most important corners in the downtown. So I read your response with some optimism, and in that Mr. Chmiel, who is the architect, is moving forward with the project, and that there's been a pre-permit meeting. Can you just tell me what that means? And historically, like, have we been at this point before with the owner? I mean, it's one thing for the architect to tell us he is moving forward, but another thing to wonder what really is happening with the owner. And I guess overall, I want to know if you share my optimism, and if we've been here before.
Mr. Chair, I do share Councillor McKinney's optimism, and we in the long history of Somerset House, this is the closest we have come to working drawings and perhaps the issuance of a building permit. So I do share that optimism. Again, as a result of the work last year, the site is secured and protected, and I think that some of the work being undertaken now is just because it's highly technical to tie a new building into an old building, and that's what's being undertaken. So I think we should all continue to feel optimistic.
And a time frame for maybe when that optimism should wane?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't like to speculate on that.
Okay, well, they've got a 2-year heritage permit. That's probably what, we're 6 months into that now. Is that correct? So
yeah, their heritage permit expires, and Mr. Chair, in 2019, but it's not that the building has to be built by then, it's the permit has to be applied for by then. Mm-hmm. And I certainly think that with the dedication of the current architect and his interest in reviving the corner, that I don't think, well, again, I can't speculate, but as of today, I don't think we're at risk of the 2-year time frame running out. As far as the architect is concerned, he is committed.
Okay. Well, I'll probably, or quite likely in the next 7, 8, 9 months, bring another inquiry if in fact we haven't seen anything, just so that we can be kept updated.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's a great idea. And if there's any interest in, engaging with the architect or whatever, we can always look into that.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I myself just had a question on 287 Cumberland Street. Two related questions. One is this committee and council ultimately approved an application for demolition of a house that I believe was also addressed on Cumberland, which was applied for in anticipation of a development application, which council approved. And now, with the pending sale of the property, I'm just wondering, was that house demolished once council approval was granted?
Mr. Chair, that house still remains. So the existing permit on the site well, 207, 209 Murray was demolished from an earlier permit, but the one on Cumberland still remains, and the existing heritage permit expires at the end of January 2018, and so then all permission related to the site goes away.
So is there any way, and I don't know if our legal counsel can advise us, but I don't know how closely we tied the approval of demolition of that property to approval of the application which we anticipated at that time would be built. So I guess what I'm wondering is there a mechanism to say, given that this development application doesn't appear to be moving forward in light of the fact that the property is for sale, is there a way to put a pause on the demolition permit?
Mr. Chair, the permit under the Act will expire on January 2018, and it is tied to the approval of a development. Plus, there are planning applications out of the Planning Act that are required for this property, and they also haven't been, those applications haven't been filed or approved, so that is also a way of ensuring the retention of that house until there's more knowledge of what's happening.
So in the case where nothing happens on the property and it continues to be for sale, well past the January 2018 expiration date, presumably property standards and our bylaw staff will be monitoring this property, and if it stays on the market for many years to come, there is little we can do, I guess, except for have bylaw staff ensure that the city's property standards bylaws are being complied with. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions on either of these inquiries? Okay. In that case, we are adjourned, and I would note that our next meeting is Friday, unusually Friday, the 10th of November at 9:30, and we'll see you then. Thank you to staff.